Hi, everyone. I'm Thérèse, and this is New York Girl Again, The After, the podcast for caregivers who have survived the hardest chapter of their lives and are now finding both the courage and the strength to write the next one. Today, we're talking about something that I resisted for a very long time and am only now beginning to embrace: the power of surrender. And if you're a caregiver listening right now, I have a feeling you might feel that exact same resistance rising up in your chest. Because surrender, it has a bad reputation, doesn't it? We associate it with giving up, admitting defeat, throwing in the towel. And caregivers? Well, caregivers don't surrender. We fight. We fight the disease. We fight the decline. We fight impossible odds. We fight insurance companies and broken hospital systems. We fight exhaustion, and we fight fear. We fight to give our loved ones one more holiday, one more birthday, one more beautiful memory, one more good day. Often, that fighting spirit becomes who we are. It becomes our identity, our survival strategy, our superpower. But what happens when the caregiving journey ends? What happens when the crisis is over? What happens when there is finally nothing left to fight for? The truth is, I think many of us continue fighting anyway. Even out here in the after. We fight the grief. We fight the sadness, the loneliness, the disappointment, the reality. And perhaps most painfully, we fight ourselves. Recently, I've been sitting with a book that feels like an absolute goldmine for the weary soul. It's called Letting Go: The Pathway of Surrender by psychiatrist David Hawkins. And inside those pages, I stumbled across a single concept that completely reframed how I look at healing. It's simple but profound, and honestly, it's a little uncomfortable. The idea is this: what if the thing exhausting us isn't the pain? What if it's the resistance? When you hear the word surrender, what's the immediate image that comes to mind? For most of us, it's a white flag. It's failure. It's losing the war and admitting the other side won. That's exactly what I have always thought. But Hawkins defines surrender very differently. He describes it simply as the letting go of resistance. It's not becoming passive, and it's not pretending the pain doesn't exist or saying something was okay when it absolutely wasn't. It is just releasing the grip of your resistance. When I sat with that, I realized just how much life force we burn trying to argue with reality. Reality says, this happened. Our mind says, it shouldn't have. Reality says, the caregiving chapter is over. Our mind says, I'm not ready. Reality says, this person made their choices. Our mind says, but they should have acted differently. Reality says, this loss is real. And our mind says, I refuse to accept it. What Hawkins argues is that the true suffering doesn't come from the reality of the situation. It comes from our own mental argument with that reality. It's the endless, draining loop of our mind shouting, "This shouldn't be happening," at a situation that has already happened. And caregivers understand this loop better than anyone. We spent years trying to change outcomes, trying to protect, trying to prevent, trying to force reality to cooperate with what we want. And sometimes it just doesn't. From a psychological perspective, this wrestling match makes perfect sense. Why do we fight reality so fiercely? Because the human brain is hardwired to seek control. Uncertainty triggers a deep, primal stress within us. The brain wants answers, certainty, and resolution. It wants to know exactly how the story ends or why it has to end. And when life refuses to cooperate, we try to regain control by thinking harder. We analyze. We replay events at 2 a.m. We search for explanations, trying to mentally solve a situation that is no longer solvable. Does that sound familiar? We became expert problem solvers out of necessity. But then we hit a wall in the after, where we discover there are some things that cannot be fixed, not by effort, not by sacrifice, not by love, and certainly not by worry. And that feels terrifying, because if we can't control it, then who are we? There is exhaustion in holding on. And that's the part that stopped me in my tracks. Hawkins talks beautifully about how much vital energy our resistance consumes. When I look back over these past 5 years in the after, I realize how many times I was utterly, completely depleted, not because of the things that had happened, but because of how hard I was fighting them, how hard I was fighting the reality of them. I was fighting the grief. I was fighting the disappointment. I was trying to mentally negotiate with situations that were already over. I was pouring all my life force into trying to write different endings in my head, trying to make sense of things that were never going to make sense, and trying to force answers out of situations where no answers exist. That internal war requires an enormous amount of energy. I think this is exactly why so many caregivers feel bone tired long after the actual caregiving has ended. Many of us are simply carrying a quiet war inside our own minds. The war between what happened and what we wish had happened. And wars are exhausting, especially the ones that can never be won. Let's be honest. Surrender feels scary because it feels like letting go of hope. It feels like saying, "This is it. This is all there is." But one of the greatest insights from letting go is that surrender is not giving up hope. It's giving up attachment. And those are two entirely different things. You can still hope. You can still dream, pray, love, and care deeply without demanding that reality bend to your timeline or your wishes. Surrender isn't asking you to stop caring. It's just asking you to stop fighting what is already real. Modern psychology shows us that when we try to push emotions away, we actually amplify them. Psychologist James Gross proved through his research that emotional suppression doesn't make the feeling disappear. It just increases your physiological stress. In short, you don't get rid of the pain. You just add a heavy layer of struggle on top of it. And let's face it, caregivers are world-class experts at suppression. During the crisis, you didn't have the luxury of falling apart. There were medications to give, appointments to keep, and lives depending on you. You locked it down and kept moving. But now that the caregiving has ended, those emotions are still waiting for you in the room. The grief, the anger, the loneliness, the fear. Surrender means finally opening the door and allowing them to exist without trying to fix them or judge them. You don't feed them. You don't fight them. You just let them breathe. And strangely, the moment you stop fighting them is the exact moment they begin to lose their grip on you. The people I admire most in this world are no longer the ones who fight forever. They are the ones who eventually found peace. They are the people who stopped arguing with reality, stopped needing every single answer, and learned how to hold grief in one hand and joy in the other. They learned how to love without clinging and how to move forward without forgetting. That takes an incredible, fierce kind of courage. It asks us to trust that we can survive uncertainty. It asks us to trust that we can survive reality. And if anyone on this earth has already proven they can survive the unthinkable, it's us. It's caregivers. So today, I want to leave you with one question to carry with you this week. What are you still fighting? Not what are you feeling or what are you grieving? What are you fighting? What reality are you still arguing with? What outcome are you still trying to force? What past chapter are you refusing to let close? And what might happen if you finally surrendered? Not because you're defeated, not because you've given up, but because you are finally, beautifully ready for peace. Maybe surrender isn't losing. Maybe surrender is simply saying, this happened. I don't have to like it. I don't have to approve of it. I don't have to pretend it didn't hurt. But I can stop fighting reality. And maybe that is where peace begins. Not when the pain disappears. Not when the answers finally arrive. Not when life becomes fair. But when we finally stop demanding that reality be something other than what it is. Because the truth is, you have already carried enough. You have survived enough. And perhaps your next chapter isn't asking you to become stronger. Perhaps it's asking you to become softer, to loosen your grip, to trust, to surrender. And in doing so, to discover that peace was never found in winning the war. It was found in finally putting down your weapons. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If this episode resonated with your heart, please share it with another caregiver who is trying to find their way through the after. And if you are looking for deep, gentle support as you navigate grief, identity, and rebuilding your life, I invite you to join our New York Girl Again community. You can also book a personal one-on-one guided reset session with me through the website. Together, we'll look at what's keeping you stuck, release the resistance, and help you gently reconnect with the person you are becoming. Until next time, let your shoulders drop, take a soft, deep breath, and remember that you have permission to put down the fight. I'll talk to you soon.